What's up, humans? Welcome to another episode of Humans of the Multiverse.
Our goal is to bring people together by featuring the stories of our friends from all over the globe.
We want to share our interests with the world, and that's why we started this show.
So if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. Press the like button and subscribe to our channel.
And if you have a compelling story to tell, send us an email.
Thanks for watching.
Aleksander Olek Czeszkiewicz is a brilliant young Polish researcher, author, and content creator whose work delves into the mysteries of ancient civilizations, lost history, and the enigmatic workings of the universe. At just 17, he penned his debut book, Déjà Vu, Has Everything Already Been? A groundbreaking exploration of lost civilization and humanity's forgotten past, which earned acclaim both in Poland and internationally. His insatiable curiosity drives him to uncover truths hidden in ancient texts, cosmology, and consciousness, challenging conventional narratives with fresh perspectives. We hope you enjoyed this fascinating episode of Humans of the Multiverse.
It's good to meet you, Olek. My name is Mike. Welcome to the show. We have a lot of common interests, so we're glad to have you today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and obviously I'm Dave from Mike and Dave's, and yeah, we're super excited. Common interest, but shared from across the ocean, which is cool. We want to make friends with as many people who don't live in the United States as possible, because it spreads our message, it spreads your message, it makes friends, it shares cultures. So why don't we start there, Olek? Like, where are you from in Poland? Like, what was growing up like for you? That kind of thing.
I'm from Poland, as you mentioned. I'm from the northernmost part of Poland, near the Baltic Sea. I'm in a nice neighborhood, nice situation, because I have the same distance to sea, to go to the sea, but at the same time the same distance, for instance, to forests. So I'm not only by the sea, but I have multiple of things to go to. So I really enjoy, actually. I don't need to travel far away. I just can sit here at home and then go to travels, journeys nearby anytime I want. So yes, I'm on the northernmost part of Poland, in Gdańsk, near Baltic Sea, and now I'm 22 years old. And yes, my story is very interesting, maybe long, but I will try to shorten it here. But I started my research and I started being interested in these topics, like, I don't want to call it alternative history, but
I don't like that.
Deeper into history than the mainstream. And when it comes to not only history, but also to the biggest mysteries of the universe, of our reality, of our world, I started very early. And I was always a pretty good student. My mom used to be a historian. My dad was and still is an engineer. So at home, I had plenty of books, plenty of resources. My parents loved watching documentaries. So I would say from a very young age, I was into knowledge about the world when it comes to the holistic picture. So whatever I was interested in, I was, I maybe at that time I didn't understand what was exactly written in these books, but I was interested in this topic, so I was just skimming through the books that were at home. So at the very early age, I was into, let's say, science when it comes to the entire science, not only like a specific part when it comes to history. And as I said, I was always a good student. However, at one point we had a problem because there was a switch in the education system here in Poland, and it was really hard to get to high school because it was double the years for one place. So it was twice as hard to get into high school at that time. I was a good student, but I wanted to take shortcut a little bit. So I was attempting plenty of competitions, contests, because at a very high level, at a level of an entire district, if you were a winner or like in the top 10, you could choose whatever high school you want. So I attempted, because my mother was a historian, I attempted historical competition. It was during my middle high school, but it was a very high level competition. I needed to know a lot of knowledge, not only from, of course, my level, which was not that advanced, but also from, of course, advanced high school levels or even academic levels. And my mother was a historian, so I had plenty of resources already at home. And I was learning, and for this contest, I needed to learn the entire.
Nope, lost him for a sec.
For this
He was doing
contest,
good.
needed to learn the entire. Learn the entire for the contest. That's our
Where
re-entry point.
these contests needed to learn the
Big chunk of
Hey,
history,
Olek?
almost the entire.
we lost you for a second. We lost you for these
Oh.
contests. We needed to learn the
Sorry.
entire. No, that's okay. I don't know what happens sometimes. We're prepared for it. So you said with these contests, I needed to learn the entire, and then we'll edit
Yes,
it.
yes, I hope, because now I see Lex again. Yes, I need to know the entire history from the prehistory up until nowadays. And because of that, because why I'm mentioning something during my middle high school, I'm mentioning that because at that time I started questioning things. Because when I saw the entire picture of history, how the current paradigm, current model looks like, I started questioning. Is it really like that? How do we know that this is how our past turned out, especially when it comes to these prehistoric earliest times? How do we know that first civilization was ancient Sumer and later Egypt, India? And why there couldn't be something before that? Why there couldn't be something more? And at that time, I started learning, because I was always into science at a holistic level. And parallel to that, I had plenty of other competitions from other niches, from other areas of knowledge, like biology. I loved genetics at that time. And when I learned from biology, from genetics, that anatomically modern humans, so like me nowadays, like we nowadays, not like some hominids, previous species, previous ancestors of humans, but when I learned that anatomically modern humans, almost just as we are here right now, existed for at least 200,000 years, and our recorded history from the first civilization of ancient Sumer was about 7,000 years, or even shorter, 6,000 years, then I started being interested in what possibilities could be there in this 200,000 years. Imagine 200,000 years, and here our recorded history began at Sumer about 4,000 years before Christ, so about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. It is a proportion of 95% of unknown history to, let's say, 5-6% of the known history. And even nowadays, I think a few months ago, there were newer studies, and nowadays it is even conservatively accepted that anatomically modern humans haven't existed for 200,000 years, but for at least 315,000 years. So we put the roots of humanity even 60% back into the past. So, you know, there are so many possibilities imagined for lost civilizations, for any kinds of cultures, any kinds of human settlements, etc. And when I learned that those stories of our ancestors, because all over the world we find stories of some kinds of previous civilizations, like the famous Atlantis or Lemuria, but also of previous cities or of previous tribes, previous cultures, I thought, why are we thinking of it just in terms of fairy tales, myths, and fantasies of our ancestors, when we actually have so much potential when it comes to prehistory? And it started, as I mentioned, back then, and it led to me writing my first book. Déjà Vu has everything already been. Here it is, just at the age of 17. Then I needed to wait a year for being 18 to publish it, because I needed to be of age of 18 here in Poland. And then at the age of 19, I translated. Here is the English edition, English version. So I translated it myself. And it isn't like some kind of short book. It is 450 pages and 400 pages in Polish. Here actually I have also the Polish version. So here it is.
And you did the translation yourself?
Yes, now even I'm translating, but this time from English to Polish, a book by my friend Michael Leflem, who is a historian about Atlantis, because now I started publishing more books in Poland to just, you know, if I have an audience of people who are interested in this topic, so in Poland there aren't many books in this genre, I would say. So I think it's of value for me to translate the most important books, in my opinion, in this topic and giving it here for Polish people.
So I wanted to ask about that because your mother is a historian in the Polish system, and you're saying that there's not a lot of these types of books in this genre, which is I don't like using the word alternate history either. So tell me about the Polish. What did you learn? What do they tell you? What is the mainstream narrative or whatever? What do you learn about human history growing up in school in Poland? What is your mom's view on that, and what does she think about your adventures into the past? Does she agree with some of your book and that kind of thing?
Actually, here in Poland we have a bit different situation than in the West when it comes to the US or the Western Europe, because during our last 50 years or even last 20 years, we had so many changes when it comes to history, depending on the current political government. So we are, I think, more open-minded to see that something may be wrong, that something that was commonly accepted now isn't accepted anymore, especially that before 90s we were a communist country, and of course not maybe like the Soviet Union, but we were of course under a communistic regime, and because of that I think people were also not trusting when it comes to authorities, when it comes to what is true in media. And I think it is a little bit different nowadays in Poland in 2025, of course, but I would say even 10 years ago, I would say most of the people I knew, most of neighbors, most of the people at school, even other teachers were very, very not trusting when it comes to what is told to be true. So I think that because of that, because of, I would say, negative experience from the Second World War on up until the 90s here in Poland, we are a little bit, not trusting, and we need to double check many things, and we are very careful when it comes to absolute truth. And even I would say after the communist regime, because I was born in 2003, so even after that I remember that plenty of the things at school when it comes to history were changed, maybe not altogether like before, but were changed when it comes to the emphasis on what the history is focusing on. So if we had one government which was very patriotic, we had exaggerated patriotic things in our history books. And then when it came to the other side of the political spectrum, I don't like talking politics at all, but it is a nice example that when it came to the other polar opposite of the political spectrum, then it was completely distorted, like those big battles, let's say, because Polish history is very, very extensive, and I would say even objectively speaking, not from some kind of paradigm thinking, Polish history can be a little bit, helping us because our ancestors were winning some battles, etc., and were, keeping our culture after the partitions, because we were partitioned for 123 years, and still Poland is nowadays, we have Polish language, which is different than the language of partitioners like German or Russian. So I think that our history can be empowering, but I see that when it came to the opposite spectrum of the political side, then all of these huge things, which were of course exaggerated before, but still there were some facts that these were huge wins and huge bonuses for us, were completely discarded and were omitted. So it was really funny, and even plenty of history teachers that were teaching me throughout the years, not connected to me or my mother, were telling us that yes, this is funny because depending on the political government, depending of their ideologies, they are shifting history at least a bit.
That's very interesting to me. Mike, what do you think about that?
It's a great perspective because in spite of the fact that there may have been turmoil or rapid changes in the past, in a sense that has produced a more resilient population, because you've seen more things. You're not going to be fooled as easily when you've seen different versions of the same thing. Whereas when things are the same for far too long, you start to think that everything is as it is, as exactly as you're told. And people aren't trained to be skeptical. So it's great.
Yeah, and people grew up, here in the United States and Canada, and I'm Canadian and American, basically feeling as though they could trust the government, right? They're only recently, we don't talk a lot of politics on the show either, but only recently people are starting to realize that some of these institutions have been lying to them, for whether it's for
Mhm.
political reasons, financial reasons, social control reasons, whatever. It's sort of a new thing. So I wasn't expecting that answer, but it makes a lot of sense that, if you in the past had a past history of not being able to trust the government to tell you the truth, it would create a more open-minded culture. So that's very interesting.
Open-minded, but at the same time closed-minded when it comes to trusting,
Ah,
especially authorities. So it isn't about being open-minded for many ideas that, oh, history may be like that, may be like that, but it is also about being conservative in
mm,
what we already know and what we already trust, because we are not
mm,
trusting what is coming new, what is coming even from, it used to be like that, maybe nowadays it's a bit different. We are always, we've became too close with the Western world. However, I'd say that, let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when I was very young, it was like we are not trusting what is coming from the West. And it wasn't that it was just a part of people who are very conservative and still is conservative, but it was that, everyone had in the back of their mind that there may be something wrong, that we need to be careful. We need to be open, of
mm,
course, but we need to be careful.
mm.
So people are also careful when it comes to my work when I say that, oh,
Sure.
this is different, history went different. So this is, it goes both ways.
Let's pause for a second. We lost Mike. I know where I want to go. I got my question in mind. Let me just make a little note.
Matrix is attacking us.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody's trying to shut us down. Let me just type in my question quick so that. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. I know what I want to ask. He didn't seem like he was having any
Hmm.
issues. He wasn't freezing or anything, so that's weird. Um, just for casual talk. So what's? I'm going to ask a dumb, ignorant question, but what season are you in right now in your area of Poland? What's the weather like? That kind of thing.
Yes, we are a bit cold. No, not maybe colder, of course, because in the US it's cold also in plenty of regions,
Sure.
but we are in a little bit colder area. However, because I'm near the Baltic Sea, it's
Hmm.
different. It's something to do with nature that we have. When it comes to winters, our winters are a bit milder than on the parts when there is no Baltic Sea. So we are in that extreme. But in some places like 300 kilometers away, there are winters that are very strong. And even, I think, 3 weeks ago, or at the beginning of May, we had
Hmm.
snow in plenty of regions still, which
Wow.
isn't that natural.
That's interesting. I just brought up weather, Mike, because I was curious while you were out. You weren't having any issues like before that. You just all of a sudden got booted, and you're a little bit fuzzy right now. Does he look fuzzy to you guys, Brittany and Olek?
No, I think
No.
it's okay now.
Brittany says yes.
The connection is what it is. I had actually that was the second time my internet had gone out, but the first time it buffered me back in without leaving the room. That one was just
Oh, okay.
30 seconds too long.
Should
So
Do you think it would be
keep
helpful if I ended stream and switched to 720?
no, just keep going. If I drop out again, this normally this time of day, this is not unusual. Now I'm remembering between 10 and noon, my internet does this. It's
Okay.
whatever.
All right. We can
Sorry.
work with it though. No worries.
Yep.
No
We'll
big
cut that
deal.
part out. Yep.
Yeah. So then, with you gave us your background and what the historical and like in current climate is as far as information and stuff in Poland. And you're very young. You're only 22. I didn't realize that. And you're a published author at age 18, which I must say, congratulations. That's really cool.
Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Was the plan to start a YouTube channel as well? Talk us through starting the YouTube channel. How long have you been a YouTuber? You've got 12,000 subscribers in Poland or something like that, correct?
Yes, something
So
like that.
tell us about your journey there.
Oh, it was again a long journey. I think it's been already like 5 or even 6 years, and plenty of the videos that I've published before, I maybe deleted them, maybe sent to private because I've always wanted to have better and better quality when it comes to everything. I always liked public speaking, and even when I just started writing my book and even researching my book during the middle high school, when I was attempting these competitions, I was always one of the best. I don't want to brag, but even teachers were telling that I was very good at public speaking, giving presentations, and it wasn't only that I was good at it, but I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I preferred, giving presentations than doing other kinds of things. So
Hmm.
it motivated me, and because I knew a little bit about recording, about computers, about internet, so I started very early. I think before I was 18 years old, like 17, maybe 16. So I started in Polish, but very early I also started parallel to that English channel. Nowadays I haven't published in English for a long time because I've been doing other things. Nowadays I'm 22, so I need, to work a bit. So I'm editing also for others. I'm publishing books here in Poland. So, but I try to go more full time when it comes to my work and just, writing books, publishing books, going to podcasts, maybe recording myself, videos, etc. But I started very early, and I'd say that when it comes to long form content, because I started way, way before the shorts were even a thing, when it comes to long form content, I've recorded maybe 1,000 episodes when it comes to long form
Wow.
content, both in Polish and English. And I say long form content, so above 10 minutes. I think now I have on my Polish channel 200 plus videos in Polish.
Mhm.
I had like 60, I think, long form in English altogether, but also plenty of podcasts and plenty of interviews besides that. And I've deleted plenty of videos before. I've also been on plenty of other channels. I had plenty of other channels before, so I'm really experienced about that. But I had a little bit break when it comes to, unfortunately, English content. However, I really, really think everyone should check out my English channel, Aleksander Czeszkiewicz Global. And I think that now, this year, this maybe summer, I will have time to create more and more things, and I want them to be like a little bit documentary style, so more editing, more value, and plenty of valuable information. So I have a lot of experience when it comes to talking. I even talked a lot, had plenty of talks when it comes to audiences, like in
Hmm.
front of 150 people live, not recorded via camera and via internet. So I also had plenty of experience at that. I've been to a few public speaking competitions during my high school, but had no like huge places and stuff like that. But I have plenty of experience when it comes to stuff like that. And I think I really love talking, both talking and writing. So these are two of my biggest things. I also like editing, so it's a bonus when it comes to content creation.
Yeah, and you sound like you are a very well spoken guy, and in English, which is your second language, correct?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so that's very impressive as well. And so we did. That's definitely one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on the show is to promote your English YouTube channel, which is doing very good right at the moment. It's got about 900 subscribers and growing. So tell us about the theme and the vision for your English YouTube channel. What do you want to tell the audience about it?
I think not only for the English channel, but I would say my whole vision when it comes to my work, when it comes to everything I do, content wise, book wise, research wise, I'd say I want to. I'm interested in the biggest mysteries of the past. So I'm not maybe interested in some minor details about maybe Templars or some kind of that. I want to go and search for the biggest questions, like what was before the first civilizations, how old is
Hmm.
our history, how our universe was created, how our
Hmm.
universe work, can we have free energy, or can we decode the code of our reality, like the code of the matrix, and use it, for instance, to create something or to understand the laws of nature. And I think I do that because I see that educational system, and I was very, very deep into it. I was learning a lot. I was in plenty of competitions, contests, etc. And I think because of this experience, I'm like that. I want to maybe not force on my views. I'm not even strong that, oh, Atlantis for sure existed and others are stupid because they do not believe in it. No, I want to show the possibility when it comes both to our past and when it comes to human potential, potential when it comes to our universe, spirituality, how things are in the universe. So I want to show the potential. And the main areas are, of course, the lost history, so the biggest mysteries of the past. The other would be the universe and science when it comes to the material stuff, like maybe technology is a part of it, maybe cosmology, physics, universe, Big Bang, and things like that. But also, the third one is the metaphysics, philosophy, spirituality. And these are I divide it into three big actually categories, and then I go deeper through the threads of each category. So these are my main areas of interest.
Got it. So, our ancient past, and how that connects to, um, the science and modern history and conscious experience and all that stuff, right? You're trying to connect the dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And so I guess we could move on to your book. And if you want to flash on the screen again, did you have when you're about to write a book at age 17? What were people telling you? And Mike, did you have anything you wanted to mention?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I thought maybe you were trying to say something. Yeah, I just was curious. Like, when you're about to write a book on ancient history, I'm curious what your mom thought of that. Because was she encouraging? Was she like, what? And what kind of
My
feedback were you getting?
parents were very open about that, and they helped me financially with the first edition of the Polish books, because back then I needed some money, because nowadays you can publish for free on like Amazon, KDP, and things like that. But back then it wasn't a thing in Polish, so they helped me. They were open, but they weren't helping me when it comes to the essence of the book, what was inside of it, and stuff like that. As the last thing, my mom proofread it for some errors and things like that. But there was some help, but not like big encouragement, like some people would say. And when it comes to other people, plenty of people were not believing in that. And I remember, because I had 18th birthday in April, and I gave in May to the publisher, like self-publisher, but to the person who was making the book, printing and stuff like that. And it took a long time till December, so half a year. And plenty of people were not believing, were thinking that this man was just, fooling every one of us, that he will write a book at this young age. Plenty of people were not believing in that. But then, just before Christmas, the book arrived, and many people were actually shocked, because, as I mentioned, it isn't like like nowadays, plenty of influencers and other people who do not have vast knowledge are writing anything like books 90, 100 pages long, or even 150 pages, very, very short works, which aren't very, very deep. But my book was actually not a huge, but it was a significant one. So plenty of people were shocked, plenty didn't believe that I would do that. But I managed, and then a year after I published it in English. So there was some encouragement, some help, but not that much. I was on myself. I needed to read these books are real, because plenty of people are telling us that, oh, this is like green screen. No, this is real. I can, put some book from it. So I needed to read hundreds of books. I think I had 120 in the bibliography of the book. So nowadays, I think behind me and on other shelves, I have almost 1,000 books. So I have tons of knowledge, and I want to combine it, as you mentioned, connect the dots, because I think that nowadays, when it comes to especially science and education, everything is specialized, everything is disconnected. And when we don't see the big picture about how everything works, we are not knowing and understanding the universe.
That's absolutely right. Uh, and in some ways, the only way to make an advance in science is to specialize. You have to hone in on a
Hmm.
particular area in order to push our knowledge forward one step. But that should not be at the expense of the big picture. We can't lose sight of the forest because we're specializing in just one tree. So I appreciate your open minded approach in that respect. Now, when you wrapped up publishing this book, you wowed some friends and family that didn't expect you to do that. What was your first thing afterwards? Did you take a week off or a month off? Did you start reading someone else's book that you hadn't had time to read, or did you start drafting the second book, or what?
I was actually at that time during high school, and I was
Wow.
on like an extended program when it comes to high school because I wasn't in high school in the Polish educational system, but in international in English. So that helped me translating my work into English because most of the subjects I didn't have in Polish, but in English. And at
Mhm.
that time, I also needed to write plenty of essays, which for me as a writer was very, very easy. And plenty of teachers were shocked how I can, make essay a week later after it was assigned. And during that time, I actually, maybe I haven't published another book, but I wrote plenty of essays, long articles for 2000, 2500, 4000 words. And because I was assigned to take a broad topic, anything I want, but for instance, in maths, in history, in world religions, in topics like that, I used these assignments to research further my things. And for instance, in history, I had an essay about prehistoric measures of the earth. So it was very interesting, and the teacher was not happy about that. In mathematics, I had about the geometry and maths behind solar systems, so the golden ratio, the algorithm behind how planets behave, because it's not random as science would think. So it was very, very epic. Actually, a few days ago, I had in Polish a presentation on one of bigger actually channels with 30,000 subscribers, and people were shocked because there are so many things in the solar system that we do not know as people who, oh, we learn that there is the solar system and stuff like that, but it isn't random at all. And I also researched at that time, this was the longest 4,000 word essay. It was about the idea, because it was in world religions, and it was idea of consciousness as the source of the universe in religions and philosophies. So I didn't stop because at the same time, when I was waiting half a year for all the things to be finished for the book to be ready and printed, so I was working more and more. And I had even a period back then when I was publishing daily videos on YouTube, like those long form videos, 15, 20 minutes long. So probably that was one of the ways that, I gained experience when it comes to speaking, when it comes to being in front of camera, when
Mhm.
it comes to
Yeah.
sharing the work, because that's why probably I deleted some videos, because I was even learning how to easily, because it's a different art, to show and explain things to people. And these are very advanced
Mhm.
things like the solar system, consciousness, lost history. So I was
Mhm.
learning, and I was doing all the things all the time. I only recently in the last 2 years made a little bit break because I needed to work on other things.
Wow. So you seem to have a pretty significant drive and work ethic for
I
somebody.
was very passionate about that. So I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just in flow, as I mentioned before we had a conversation. If we have some schema behind it, no, just go with the flow. It's the best thing ever. And then later you will see and correct any mistakes that come up.
I like it. So I actually wanted to dive into that solar system stuff really quick. So, for briefly, could you explain to the audience what the golden ratio is, and then how does the golden ratio show up in the solar system? I've never heard that before.
Hmm. I think I want to explain because the golden ratio itself is is based on how you see different parts of lines. I won't explain into that, especially in English. Sorry. However, I will explain that golden ratio is based on the number phi,
Hmm.
phi, and it is based on the Fibonacci sequence, for example. And the
Hmm.
Fibonacci sequence, the famous Fibonacci sequence when we take two terms of this sequence, like term fourth and fifth, and if we add them together and divide by the previous number, we will be closer and closer to this golden ratio, which is like number pi, an infinite number like 1.618, and then infinite numbers behind that. And of course we can have this number in the famous golden spiral, etc. But what is amazing about that is that the bigger term in this Fibonacci sequence we take to calculate this golden ratio, the more precise we have. So if we take a millionth term, and as I mentioned, divided the sum of two by the previous, then we'll have like, let's say, 8 digits after the dot of the precision of the Fibonacci. So the bigger term we get, etc. So this is the golden ratio, and how, and it is in plenty of places. It's very advanced. I just mentioned because it's an interesting thing. It was a maths assignment, so that's why I was calculating everything. But on the last presentation, I showed slides with all the calculations. And why I mentioned that, because the golden ratio can be also in the distances from Sun to planets. So first planet Mercury, then Venus, then Earth, then Mars, and we will see that those planets aren't just put randomly or according to some law of gravity, etc., but they are put in a sequence connected to the golden ratio. So I was calculating that, but also the golden ratio can be found when it comes to the diameters of Sun, Moon, and Earth. And it is an interesting thing because plenty of ancient cultures had as a sacred number number 432, like modern theories about 432 hertz. For sure, plenty of our viewers heard of them, but also 432 when it comes to the Great Pyramid, when it comes to the Rig Veda, number of verses, number of syllables in the Rig Veda is based on 432 and 108. And those two numbers can be found when it comes to the ratios between Sun and Earth, Moon and Earth, and the diameters of all of them together. Because when it comes to modern science, we think, okay, the planets are revolving around the Sun, but the Moon is only connected to Earth because it is revolving around the Earth. However, we can see the full eclipse of the Sun. We can see that. And why is that? Because the size of the Moon is in the proportion to the distance from the Moon to the Sun and from the Earth to the Sun. So these are the exact dimensions that can make that the Moon can take the whole Sun on the, of course, when we see it during the solar eclipse. So, it's very advanced. I would prefer maybe later with some slides, etc. But these are the things, and sorry because the dog is barking there, but probably not. But there are plenty. It isn't a single thing about only one golden ratio in the solar system, on one, this number 108. No, you can create an algorithm, and I was showing on the slides how I've gotten to that. So one calculation after the other, and at the end we can have an entire algorithm that can be based on the solar system. So we can put the algorithm and put planet 1, planet 2, planet 3, and it will actually create the approximately the same distances. It is for one planet 1% error, for other 3, for other 0.5%. So these are very not significant numbers, of course. However, it's like a video game. If nowadays I wanted to create a solar system of some sorts in my video game, I would use this algorithm, and it will create a model of the solar system that is there in reality. So that's why it's important, and it is based, as I mentioned, on these two numbers, 108 and 432, but also on the golden ratio. But sorry for explaining it that way, but these are plenty of calculations, but at the end it's worth it.
That was an excellent explanation, Olek. And now I'm wondering, you described how you had experience in both recording and editing, video editing. Did you ever have experience in programming properly? or training?
I had a little bit, but not an extensive experience. When I was very, very young, I was playing video games. I was programming plugins, editing already
Yes.
programmed plugins for games for some servers. So I had an experience, and because of that, I'm not into programming, etc. However, whenever I had like programming lesson later on, because it was mandatory, for instance, to have one lesson per week of such a programming class, then because of that, I was thinking differently. I wasn't interested in programming or these languages, but I was interested in the meta idea beyond that. That actually, if we measure everything in our universe, and if we, for instance, have all the laws of physics, and if we decode that, we can see that it is similar to programming a game. We can have I think that there is code behind this universe, and I'm also a little bit, I'm not against science, of course, but I'm a little bit critiquing science from many ideas, both spiritual and not. However, one of it is that nowadays, as scientists, people are measuring fake distances. We are measuring the game like I'm playing a game here on my PC, and I would measure thing on my screen of what are the distances between them, which would be stupid because in the program, in the code, it would be completely different. And I think that the biggest revolution in the future of science, maybe not even 50 years from now, maybe 100 years or more, would be decoding the code of reality. Because then, if we had an access to the code behind how matter works, because we see that it isn't completely random, as in the case of the golden ratio fractal patterns, which are the same on the veins in my body and on the rivers on Earth and on a bigger scale in the cosmos. We see that there is some kind of structure to it, that it is fractal. It is like the ancient idea of microcosm and macrocosm, so as above, so below. So on small levels, if we zoom in, it is self-similar, not exact, but self-similar. So we see similarities. Like we have the solar system, which isn't like atoms, but it is a little bit similar to the structure of atom, of the core and the electrons and other quarks and stuff like that. It isn't the same, of course, but it's similar. The same, we have galaxies, we have some other spirals on lower levels. As I mentioned, we have rivers, which are almost the same as blood vessels in our bodies, and it goes all the way fractally. And I think that it is evidence for that there is something, we know that there are laws of physics behind the workings of the universe, but I think that there is some kind of mathematical or even beyond mathematics, because maybe mathematics are only applied in this material realm, but I think that there is some kind of code behind this material world, and by knowing it, by finally decoding it, we would have everything. We would have free energy. We would maybe manipulate matter to however we want. And it's similar to actually when we see some kind of prophets like Edgar Casey or channeling views of our past, we will see that some kind of Lemurians or Atlanteans in these stories actually possessed some kind of technology like that, which is very, very interesting. And I don't say that everything prophets said or channelers said are true, and I do not think like that. I think that there are some distortions in their visions, and maybe some are not true at all, but some, of course, may have some truth in them. But I think that this may be the future of science, decoding the code, like in the matrix of reality of the material world.
So one of the things that we like to cover is cutting edge technology, especially technology of manipulating matter, manipulating space-time. Do you think we're ready for that? Let's say it does come out in 50 years or 100 years. Are we even ready for that in 50 years? I don't think we're ready for it today.
We may not be ready at all, but I think it's worth at least for future generations to research that and to help them, because when they will be ready finally, I don't know in what circumstances, I won't speculate about that, but maybe in some future people will be so spiritual, so morally advanced that they will be able and there would be good circumstances for that. Then I think they will learn the ancient for them knowledge, but it will be our knowledge about decoding, and they will, of course, it will be of value to them. But I don't think we are ready for that.
It's a good perspective, and I would simply observe that our technology has progressed far more rapidly than perhaps our behavior or spiritual evolution in the last 200 years. So we should be cautious about taking the next quantum leap in
Yes.
technology, maybe until we can learn how to behave properly with airplanes and automobiles.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. But I also agree with Oleg's perspective that, like, you know, we should be exploring this stuff, but it worries me a little that with the quantum computing that's coming out and AI, deep learning and things like that, we could can of worms a lot sooner than we're ready. I wanted to point out, Oleg, so obviously you're familiar with this stuff, but, like, you know, at the base level of theoretical physics, they do say that the universe is binary in nature, ones and zeros. We do see the golden ratio show up in biology. We see it show up in megalithic architecture. We see it show up now. I know that we see it show up in our actual solar system. Do you think that the golden ratio is obviously is what you're suggesting, the golden ratio, and a part of the computer code, quote unquote, of the universe? And if so, what do we do with that? You know, like, what does that mean?
It's a part of the entire, let's say, programming code, but I don't think that the golden ratio of the Fibonacci sequence is the actual code. I think that of the same values, for instance, number pi, there is the Euler number. There are plenty of things. I'm not that deep into mathematics, as I mentioned, but I'm not that, because there are plenty of people who actually are more into this kind of things. Like, for instance, Robert Edvard Grant is doing great job showing actually the importance of certain of pi, of golden ratio, of Euler number, and how are they connected. But I think that these are parts of it, and I think that things like that, like the fractal patterns that we see on all the levels of existence, from the big to the small, these are like things that are showing us that this is some kind, I don't want to say the word matrix because it can be negative in some people's mind, but some kind of creation that is programmed to some extent. But I don't think it's only about the golden ratio, of course.
No, this is part of it, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
To expand that theory, so in this universe, pi is 3.14. We've got E, we've got gravity constant, all these things. What if going multiverse? What if there's another universe where pi is 2.5 and everything's super non-Euclidean, everything's non-Newtonian, and everything just would be completely bizarre to our three-dimensional condensed sort of space-time reality that we're used to? But I think that's where you get into other ideas about multiverses, where the constants that are programmed are different. Series of universes where the behavior differs slightly, that's where it all blows wide open.
Yes, I completely agree. And even in my book, because my book is about lost history mainly, but it is Déjà Vu, has everything already been, and this title, Déjà Vu, is all about the cyclicality of nature, cyclicality of time, and in the part of the last episodes in which I describe cyclicality according to our ancestors and compared to physics, I actually describe some even physical theories, as you mentioned, multiverse is one of them, but physical theories about cyclical universe as a whole, because of course we learned that probably, maybe not 100%, but 100% sure, but according to mainstream view, it was from the Big Bang, etc. But there are plenty of even physical theories by renowned physicists, like, for instance, Nobel Prize winner Roger Penrose, that this Big Bang wasn't the beginning and that this is a cyclical Big Bang, just as our heart is contracting, expanding, is beating, the same with the universe. So from the Big Bang, it expands, then it crunches, and it goes on and on and on. And actually, for instance, in the Hindu thought, and in one of the oldest Hindu thought connected to the Rig Veda, actually it is all about this, that there were plenty of universes before that, and everything comes out of Brahman, of the source of this universe, which we cannot describe, because like other gods like Ganesha and other Krishna, these are some kind of humanoid beings or some kind of animal beings that are described, depicted as some kind of creatures forms, but the Brahman is indescribable in this matter. So it's like the source that we cannot comprehend with our material brains, logical minds. And from this source, according to also later Brahmanas, some Upanishads, it all comes out of Brahman, and then at some point it comes back to Brahman. And it is this idea, for instance, famous from the Greek mythology, that there is constant battle between order and chaos. So order is coming, the universe, these laws are the order, but then the destruction comes. There is also chaos, and I compared plenty. I love cosmology, and I love how it is similar to modern science, but also our interpretations of science, because it is not only about, because science is often about what we know for what we are very confident about, but I think also we need to go into the unknown. We need to go out of our comfort zone, out of our area of knowledge, to search for truth, because if we are only in this bubble of the known, we are not progressing at all, or only a little bit. So I love to go into the unknown and, for instance, interpret things. Like I mentioned this cyclical Big Bang thing, but also, for instance, ancient Egyptians thought that there was this primeval god. There are a few versions, but from one of the oldest versions, it is Atum, and Atum, as same as Brahman, is indescribable. Those gods of Egypt are all with animal heads, are all depicted beautifully, but you couldn't depict Atum. It was indepictable. You cannot even imagine Atum. It was such a source, because we often think that our ancient ancestors were so primitive. They thought of many gods, and then they evolved, logically speaking, that okay, how many gods, what created those many gods? So they evolved from polytheistic many gods religious systems into monotheistic one, like Christian, like of course Islam, etc. But I don't think it's like that, because in India, which is of course polytheistic religion, it is, they have like source, the main god, which is the one, the source Brahman. The same in Egypt, we have Atum, from which other gods are created, but there is this main idea of source god, of source of everything, and I think because of that, our ancient ancestors weren't that primitive. But why I'm mentioning Atum? Because the history of Atum is that Atum is surrounded by infinite waters of potential nun, and from this potential, he creates thing by thought and speech. Like in the New Testament, there is that everything was the word, like logos. So this is the same idea in Christianity, the same idea of the in Hindu religion, of course, that everything is created, but this time it is more explained, that first there is a thought, like idea of the world, let's imagine, of the universe, and then this vibration, this speech is creating the universe out of infinite, boundless potential. And I often compare it to, like, it is interpretation only to theories that the consciousness was at the beginning, the consciousness is universal, this God's mind, let's say, to compare to our modern standards. And then from this idea, the material universe is created from the infinite potential, because any kind of universe, as you mentioned before, can be created with any laws of physics. But let's say I want a dream. I want to have a lucid dream about flying. So in this lucid dream, I need to have playground, like the game, that is able to create me flying over buildings, for instance. So I need to have some laws of physics, we would say, or some structure to support that dream. And I think the similar is with ancient cosmologies, that they believed, and I wrote I will later send you these papers about the solar system, prehistoric measures of the Earth, and consciousness. 3 are in English. These were written during my high school. And actually, as I mentioned, sorry, something outside, but when it comes to this theory, is that God is imagining, God is dreaming. We often in the modern New Age stuff hear that God, it is all the image of God, the dream of God. And the God is thinking, like, let's say we are God, we want to have the universe. So then universe is created according to the idea. Let's say God wants to have human beings, like we often in plenty of religions, but not only, also in philosophies like Hermeticism, later Gnosticism, humans were created in the image of God, like in the Old Testament, in Genesis. So I think that this is the idea that is connected to that God wanted to be some sort of human, just as I would dream that I wanted to be, let's say, some actor, some famous actors, or some creature that is all powerful like superhero. So I would need to project in my mind such a scenario that would be sustainable for that, let's say, scenario that I want to. So I think this is the same with the universe, and it is also explaining, in my opinion, the fine-tuning of the universe, why all the laws are so tightly fit together that we can live and the life can happen. People say that, of course, we wouldn't know if there was no life because we are here. However, if it was a God's dream, then it doesn't matter what was before that. It is also one of the arguments of Christian fundamentalists that how do you know that what happened 5 minutes ago wasn't real but was only your memory that was installed to you, and maybe God started, let's say God started life right now, and God started here in the universe, in the consciousness, so everything is here, and the rest is only a memory. And Christian fundamentalists often rejected the idea of dinosaurs because they said that this is specifically that the world was created, let's say 4 or 6,000 years ago, according to them, but the previous dinosaurs are all like matrix, an illusion, just evidence, just memory imprinted in matter in order for us to have this vision, for us to be lied to. So the same thing goes with this God's dream, that if God wanted to dream of, let's say, us together doing what we are doing right now, it doesn't matter what we remember was before that, because all of that could be just an illusion for us to sustain our, let's say, bodies and to be limited in this experience. It's complicated, but I think it's fascinating, and the more we think about that, the more we can actually explain how our universe works, why are we here, what the life is, and things like that.
Yeah,
That is
you're blowing
great.
my mind. Yeah. Is God dreaming? That's going to be, is God dreaming with Olek Czeszkiewicz? That's going to be the title of this, this interview.
Do you think the idea of the holographic universe is more or less compatible with the God's dream, that the dream is the hologram and we are the aspects or reflections in the crystalline hologram?
Yeah, sure. I think maybe it isn't 100% as our hologram because we are of course
Sure.
limited to matter. However, I think it's a great analogy, like the analogy of Matrix I mentioned before many times. So the same with hologram, that it is all a projection of God. Because in this Hindu thought, in this ancient Egyptian thought, a little bit in the Christian thought too, but it is interpreted differently nowadays. It is all about there is God who is consciousness of some kind, because we only can think of the closest thing to God would be consciousness, just being, because why? There is something rather than nothing. This is the age-old question. So there is God, and let's say he's thinking about like we are thinking and imagining things. So it is the same with God projecting, let's say, our world. If God imagined humanity, but it is also another thing closer to Matrix, because God may not be imagining Earth from above, because we think of God from above, like he's imagining the entire Earth, humans there, cosmos there, etc. But what if he's imagining being me, being you, being other person, or even being all people at once? So maybe it is all like that, and because of that, if, for instance, I imagine myself being a superhero, I needed all the background stuff too. So I needed some kind of, in the superhero stories, skyscrapers, some kind of other people. I needed them, of course. I would need some physical laws for me to bend them. For instance, other people are limited, but I'm a superhero, etc. So it's the same with the mind of God. And I would need actually history because I wanted to be this limited one. And it's another
Right.
question that can be explained in this theory. It is a little bit my theory. I don't have it crystal clear maybe, but I'm speculating about it, and I try to understand everything that there is. And in this theory, it would actually explain everything. Why are we limited, or why God is permitting there to be evil things? Because maybe he wants some kind of limited experience. Maybe he wants to be human. Maybe he doesn't want to suffer, but maybe it's a part of this game. Like, imagine you play the game on the easiest level. Everything is so easy. Maybe you would get bored by this game. Maybe you'd want to play to challenge yourself a level harder. Maybe you want something new in this game. The same, it would explain. I wanted also to say that it would explain, Because imagine if you are, let's say, in infinite potential, that there can be everything, literally everything. Imagine, like, we cannot imagine infinity because it is everything, nothing, what is infinity? So the same
Mhm.
would be God. Why we are limited here to, for instance, the laws of physics, laws of nature? Because when there is everything, or not, there is nothing, it is boring. Because imagine everything, every potential. How you would see that, and it is often seen actually when it comes to some kind of mystical experience, that at this moment there's, let's say, million possibilities. I can move my hand here, I can move my hand here, I can talk about this, I can talk about that. So the same, imagine all kinds of scenarios, but also all kinds of universes, as we mentioned, multiverse. Imagine all of the multiverses, all of the, it will be infinite amount of multiverses, infinite amount of scenarios during this multiverse. So that's why there is limitation, because without limitation, it's, I don't know how to compare it. Not boring maybe, but everything there is. So maybe we need to be limited to actually have form. Because if we have everything, all the time, all the space, all the kinds of universes, we do not have form because it is everything. And if I want to have form of a human being or of an animal or of an universe, I need to create boundary. And laws of
Mm.
physics are to some extent the boundary. And this is another key of ancient philosophies, that this Tao thing, the first division, actually, when it comes to these first gods, Atum in Egypt, or Brahman in the Hindu thought, he creates things, but the first thing he creates is duality. Because
Mm.
it's the first division. Like our
Mhm.
cells are dividing when the new life is being formed. It is one cell being, of course, concepted. Then there are two cells, four cells, etc. And the same is with
Mhm.
our universe. Here, in our universe, we have plenty of limitations. We have plenty of laws of physics that are limiting us, and they are enabling us, for instance, for color. Imagine if everything, color is a bad example maybe, but imagine everything was of one color. We need to divide the colors to have multiple of the colors to see, because it will be strange, maybe boring. And the same with form. How can we be formless? It would be strange for everything to be formless. Like in this, some people say that in the spiritual world the form is not that strongly formed, tied together. So I think that earth is one realm, and the more we go up into on the spiritual ladder, let's say, up until the source, we go from form, which is heavily dense matter, up until being more and more formless, more and more flowy.
Hmm. No, that you're blowing my mind, Olek, and I love the concept of the universe being God's dream, and I loved how you express how if he was going to if God was going to have a dream, he would need structure, and part of that structure would
Exactly.
be history. You'd need to give your dream, your structure, like a historical context as well, and so
Exactly.
I wanted to bring it into the concept of your book. In Déjà Vu, has everything already been? In the book, you propose that history operates in cycles. I love that idea. It's something that I think about a lot. And it potentially links to ancient time frameworks like precession, the 25,920 year precession of the equinox cycles. Can you besides procession, can you tell, and along with procession, can you tell us like what you think are the biggest uh, clues, for lack of a better word, that would suggest that human history is cyclical in nature besides just procession?
hmm Yes, I've actually found out that history, in not maybe all the cases, but in many cases, is based on the precession of the equinoxes. And I even find out an example from other researcher, David Wilcock, who showed that
Mm-hmm.
history truly repeated itself after one zodiacal sign. So let's say the entire precession of the equinoxes, 25,920 years, can be divided into 12 zodiac signs. So one zodiac sign, we now hear of the age of Aquarius, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
one zodiac sign would last, I have plenty of calculations in my book for anyone
Sure.
interested, lasts for 2,160 years. And David Wilcock found out that there is a period of about 70 to 90 years that repeated during the next cycle tree. So 2,160 years later. And it wasn't about everything being exactly the same, but it is all about similar conditions but in different realities, because here we speak about the history of ancient Rome that happened again similarly in the modern day history of USA, but not modern day, but before the First World War and through the First World War. And we are talking not about, let's say, one war exactly being similar during the next zodiacal cycle. We speak of multiple wars, peace treaties, and multiple of things that happened throughout the period of about 70 to 90 years, which is a lot. And if we calculate that, and I have plenty of quotes and plenty of calculations in my book, it will be that it happened only a few months or 1 month in some cases off. So we have, for instance, imagine, I only imagine, it all is explained in my book in details. I may explain it with quotes, etc. another time. But imagine 70-year period, and let's say at the beginning of it starts a war. Then 2160 years later, which is exactly the next zodiacal cycle, the same, another war starts. With different, of course, conditions, because different technologies, different people, different nations. However, it starts similarly. It ends exactly during the same time next cycle. Then there is, let's say, peaceful time for 20 or 12 years. It happens the same in the next zodiacal cycle, and on and on and on. And even you see these similar people or archetypes of people. I think that there may be some kind of reincarnation there, that some people who were leaders back then and maybe made some mistakes reincarnated again in the next cycle. However, I think it may also be about maybe energies, maybe archetypes, like we have universal things, universal patterns, even in psychology. So I think it may be also about that similar patterns when it comes to leaders, similar patterns when it comes to history. And it is all, as I mentioned, based on the zodiacal epochs, on the precession of the equinoxes, which is also, I think, the best hard material-based evidence for reincarnation or some kind of repeating history, because it can be all traced back not to some kind of mystical calculations, etc., but it can be traced back to a true astronomical predictable phenomenon, which is, of course, the precession of the equinoxes. So I provide this example, which is the best one. I provide a few others, and also I later found out that some maybe milder ones, not such strong ones as this example. However, some examples that our history may truly be repeating through these cycles, and these cycles are actually also connected to the previous idea of the maths and geometry of the solar system. And as I mentioned a few days ago, I had an entire presentations with all the calculations, and I found out that the same code that governs the physical and the space part of our solar system can govern time. So we have balance between space and time. We have analogy that both space and time probably work on the same numbers, which are, of course, we know them as precessional numbers, or this 432 108, which 432 can be also found in the Great Pyramid of Giza, as Graham Hancock and Livius Ticini found. So I think it is all based, and further, because nowadays in this conversation we are talking about metaphysics, about the universe, about astronomy. However, my book mostly was focused on the lost knowledge of the ancients, of course, on the lost civilization, on history, on the material-based part. I later went forward into more and more stuff about our universe. However, as we see, it is all based also on ancient knowledge, and I believe that both in the schema of the Rig Veda, both in the Great Pyramid of Giza, its dimensions, our ancient ancestors decoded this knowledge, these numbers, this algorithm, which govern both how space behaves, how planets behaves, and how the cycles of time behave. So it is amazing that it is both sides. It is both about space, both about time, and we see parallels in space and time, that it isn't completely random, or time is only like going forward and nothing more. No, it is all based on the same kind of algorithm, or at least a similar one.
I'm glad you mentioned the cyclical nature of human history. I think it's cyclical. Our culture is also cyclical as well, and so you're kind of blowing my mind right now. But I want, like, since you mentioned a couple times, let's narrow it down into the content of your book. Obviously suggestions of like Atlantis or an Atlantis type civilization, Lemuria, that kind of thing may have existed before our recorded history. I know I've seen on your YouTube channel that you talk a decent amount about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Baalbek in Lebanon. To you, what are the most compelling archaeological or textual clues that you've found that challenge the mainstream historical narrative?
What is interesting, because when it comes to the first civilizations that were the first ones, we of course know that the ancient Sumer was the first one, then a little bit later it was Egypt and India, parallel to that. So the first civilization were Sumer, Egypt, and India. But all of these three civilizations, which we now consider to be the first, were telling that either they were much older than we think nowadays, or that they were the descendants of some kind of previous civilizations like aforementioned Atlantis, which actually blew my mind, because when I was searching for the lost history, and as I mentioned, I knew basically how the modern paradigm sees history, I went further because I knew most things about history when it comes to the broad picture. So I went further and I thought to myself that nowadays we are at least 5,000 years after the first civilizations. So maybe in ancient texts from these first civilizations, we will find some clues about prehistoric past, because these people were much closer to prehistory than we are nowadays. And I started searching, and this blew my mind, that all of the first civilizations considered themselves to be older or not to be the first at all. And of course, we have the famous Sumerian kings list, which goes about 400,000 years plus. And I mentioned in my book, because at that time it was conservatively accepted that anatomically modern humans existed for about 200,000 years. So I mentioned, yeah, maybe before that there were some aliens, Anunnaki, etc., but it is still within the scale of anatomically modern humans, that these texts are not completely mythical. However, nowadays, even on Wikipedia, if you check out, there is a mention that anatomically modern humans broached from other hominids about 500,000 years ago. And as I mentioned, conservatively, it is 300,000, 15,000 years ago that anatomically modern humans appeared. So it is still within the timeframes of the Sumerian kings list. In Egypt, we have plenty of sources, not only the Sumerian kings list, we have plenty of lists of kings similar to the Sumerian kings list, but these go about 36,000 years before the first pharaoh, according to Egyptologists, who was Narmer or Menes, depending on how you see it. Narmer Menes was the first pharaoh who united Upper and Lower Egypt, and before that, according to Egyptians, there were plenty of other rulers. Before these human rulers, there were even gods, demigods, similar stuff to ancient Sumerian king list. However, what is important here is the fact that we have plenty of sources from completely different periods of time. And I often mention three sources because these three sources are showing a similar history, but all of them are about 1,000 years apart from each other. Because the latest one is the Manetho's Kings List, which is from the end of ancient Egypt. The mid one is the Turin's Kings List, now found in the museum in Turin, which is from the reign of Ramses II, which is about plus or minus 1,500 years BC. And then we have the Palermo stone from about the age of the pyramids, plus minus 100, 200 years. I don't remember the exact dates right now, but we have three sources which are from completely different periods of history, almost 1,000 years of difference between this list. So imagine we have one historical list from 1,000 years AD, so from the medieval times, then we have one list from nowadays, and then we have one list from the times of Jesus. So this is the case when it comes to ancient Egypt. And these lists, according to Egyptologists, are within about 70% exact when it comes to our known chronological ruler. So we can compare with other sources, we can compare with mummies and artifacts, and we see that these lists of kings are very consistent with what we know from Egyptology. However, Egyptology is cutting a little bit before Narmer, this first pharaoh, and is considering as myth all the previous tales of this 36,000 years of ancient Egyptian history. And I think to myself, why do that? If most of the pharaohs after this Menes Narmer are accurate to about 70% with what we know right now, maybe these older lists are also these older kings and pharaohs dynasties listed in these sources are also true. So here we've got maybe not hundreds of thousands of years, but at least 36,000 years before first pharaoh Narmer. And in India, this is a similar but completely different case, because in India there are plenty of cultures who preserve knowledge about previous either civilizations, previous cities, previous cultures. Even in Mahabharata, we have a mention of the Battle of Kurukshetra, the famous one, but also of previous civilizations, cultures, people who lived back then. So all the first civilizations were thinking they are much older. And of course, for many years, scientists, archaeologists, Egyptologists, historians were telling, oh, these are just fairy tales. There couldn't be civilization that long ago. The same with Plato's Atlantis. Plato is telling us of some kind of mythical land, and he just mentioned, oh, let's put 9,000 years before Solon, so it will be really funny story. However, in the 90s, we found you mentioned Göbekli Tepe, which put the roots of our civilization back by at least few thousand years, because first we thought that it was ancient Sumer, but now we see that some kind, maybe not civilization, but advanced culture that was capable of building megaliths on a large scale, to be honest, was there about 10,000 years BC or even more, because still a large part of Göbekli Tepe isn't excavated, is under the sands. However, what is interesting is that I also studied the not only philosophy of science, as we mentioned, this universe stuff, but also history of science. And you know what? We thought 400 years ago that first civilizations were Rome and Greece, because we knew almost nothing about Egypt or ancient Sumer and stuff like that 400 years ago. However, we have all the sources, as in the case of Atlantis or other previous civilizations, telling us that yes, there was Egypt, and probably Egypt was before ancient Rome and ancient Greece. On the other side of the world, in the Middle East, we had mentions that, for instance, in the Bible, Abraham came from the Sumerian city of Ur, which was also considered to be mythical, but later we excavated it. So 400,000 years ago, we thought that Greece is the first. Then, only with the Napoleon's expedition to Egypt in late 1700s, early 1800s, we discovered that yes, there is Egypt, and probably it is older than that. Then, after some years, we of course decoded the hieroglyphs, etc. But still, we knew almost nothing about ancient Sumer, which is now broadly considered to be the first civilizations. You know how long ago we only discovered ancient Sumer? 180 years ago. 100 years ago, less than 200 years ago, we only discovered that yes, on the area of the Middle East there are some kinds of cities, and then these cities were connected to these civilizations, and then it turned out that these civilizations probably predate ancient Egypt. Less than 200 years ago, in the 1840s. So I imagine a similar situation could be today with Atlantis and other stuff, that these are older days, older civilizations that we haven't discovered yet, but I think that for sure we haven't excavated the entire earth for lost civilizations and for previous cultures. So I think that there is huge possibility that in some years, in 10, 20, 50 or more years, we will be taking our history back many times. As I mentioned, the latest one of these attempts of taking back our history was the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, which completely shifted our understanding of ancient humans, prehistoric humans. And I think that, who knows, maybe in 20 years we'll discover that, oh, there were some kind of societies, cultures, civilizations 40,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, or even more. So that's my take when it comes to this lost history. And I think this is the biggest thing when it comes to our understanding, that the more we learn, the more we see how little we know about our world.
It's a recurring pattern in science where we think we have it figured out, and then we learn that, oh, it's actually the Earth going around the sun and not the other way around. Like, oh, there was something before the Greco-Romans. And it's just funny how at every step of the way we're like, well, good thing we figured that out, and now we know it all, and now science is the institution that has all the answers. No, that's not science at all.
Yes. That's a good. That's a really good point. As I mentioned, I used to, and I'm still am into philosophy of science, how science works. That's why I criticize science because I know that science isn't about coming to the entire truth. As I mentioned, I think bigger than even the material universe. Science is only a tool to understand the material part of the
Yes.
universe, and we see that applied in technology. We see that, of course, materialistic science are very good when it comes to inventing new technologies which are material based, not some kind of spiritual technologies like that. But for just casual engineering, sciences are very, very good. But in my opinion, science is only a tool, a method of discovering how the material part of everything works, behaves, and stuff like that. It is not going beyond that to some kind of spirituality, God, and stuff like that. And I think that truth may also lie beyond spirituality. And I think that by psychic experiences, mystical experiences, spiritual experiences, these kinds of phenomena are showing us that we are more than matter and that we can go beyond the material realm, and the domain of modern science is only the material realm, of course with some exceptions of theoretical physics about the multiverse, cyclical time,
Hmm.
etc. But these are the exceptions, and even scientists are telling us, as in the case of the string theory, there are plenty of opponents of it that, oh, it is only imagination, we cannot check if it is true or not, so these are only speculation. And I think science is like that, and it's also similar to what I mentioned previously about going beyond our comfort zone, going beyond the known. I think science is of course about progress, and science should go forward beyond the known, should try to change things, should try to check out if the things that are commonly accepted may not be completely true or maybe even wrong, and should go forward and forward. And I see that science, by closing itself only to the material domain or to the paradigms when it comes to our history, is only within the comfort zone, within the known zone. But we need to go into the unknown, into the even speculation, as some may call it, because we won't make any progress without that.
Yes. There's a couple of very good points to clarify here. We're using the word science in almost two ways. First, science, the scientific method, is a tool. It's a very simple algorithm for reaching rational conclusions based on observations of information around you. And so far, that has proven a very useful tool for the material world. We can apply the scientific method to the material world and get repeatable, provable results. We haven't had as much luck in the spiritual or mystical realms applying that simple algorithm and getting repeatable results, which is why science sometimes. Now, the second definition of science, the institution or the practice of science, is housed within the greater academic and educational institution. Of course, not all of academics is focused in science. Scientists are within academics. And of course, you don't need to be an academic to think like a science and exercise the scientific method. So the sort of two separate things. And it is the job of the scientific establishment to be conservative. However, there's a big difference in being conservative and rejecting hypotheses simply because you don't want to entertain them. So I appreciate all that.
Mhm. Yes, I totally agree, and maybe I can clarify further because I say that I criticize science because nowadays science wants to have a monopoly on knowledge. Because there is
Hmm.
knowledge, we can acquire knowledge in many ways, but science wants us to think and wants to dominate the knowledge area of everything, that only through the scientific method we can gain knowledge about the truth. And any other things, like maybe psychic stuff, like maybe spiritual attempts of discovering knowledge, like out of body experiences, or let's say remote viewing, which were proven to in some cases be really, really accurate, these
Yes.
are not about the truth. The same with everything that isn't accepted by science is, according to them, conspiracy theory, etc. And every kind of thinking in other terms is also completely not only ignored, but it is hoax, it is conspiracy theory, etc., etc. And I think that is bad. And you know what? because you mentioned two main definitions of science. Here in Poland, we have a little bit older traditions, and nowadays, of course, when we think science here, nauka in Polish, we also think about the establishment, we also think about the scientific method. However, in the past, science was more like the Renaissance men, like the inventors, explorers. Science in Polish still can be used. There's a definition even in Polish of science as a broad term, any attempt to gain knowledge about anything.
Yes.
So even going into speculation, metaphysics can be considered to some extent science, because we are gaining knowledge or analysis of some kind metaphysical stuff, etc., etc. And I think this should be science. Attempt to gain more knowledge about the universe, about everything, or attempt to understanding it. And nowadays, when it comes to science, why I disagree with some scientific thing. For instance, I dug deeper and deeper into the scientific method philosophy of science, and there are some prior assumptions in science with which I do not agree. What are the assumptions? These are the main things when it comes to science. For instance, the best example of that is if I want to get the knowledge about the outside world. I am here and I want to get the knowledge about the outside world, then I have to assume that there is me and there is outside world. I cannot assume that there is no world, because I couldn't be able to get the knowledge about anything if I didn't assume that there is me, there is world, and there is something. So this may be prior assumption that we need to make, that there exist things exist. This can be the prior assumptions.
Right.
However, science is limiting itself with more assumptions than that, because for instance, one of the assumptions is called naturalism or scientific materialism, and naturalism means that all natural phenomena, so everything that is in matter, has its source in natural things. So there isn't anything supernatural, to shorten that. So it's the best example with history, like history of mythology. Ancient people, some primitive people thought that lightnings are caused by some angry gods. And then science went and showed, no, these are natural phenomena. And in my opinion, science gained so much confidence in explaining this stuff, and is doing nowadays it constantly with, let's say, all the spiritual visions, all the spiritual phenomena are considered by them to be hallucinations or some other physical things. Science became so confident because they were really debunking the myths that, oh, lightning strikes are caused by gods, or the plants are growing because of some other supernatural forces. But I don't think it's the right way. I think there should be still a possibility of something being beyond matter and beyond the natural. So I do not agree with materialism and naturalism, that only material things and natural things exist. I do not believe in that. I think that beyond the material realm there are things, and I think that we as humans, through the spiritual paranormal experiences, sometimes can tap into these out of matter things, and I think that we are more than matter, than just biological machines. So this is one assumption which is very limiting, because imagine there is everything there is, like we mentioned, infinity. And let's say with first assumption, of course, we need, if we want to describe and learn about forms, we mentioned that there is form in this universe, so we have the domain smaller in this infinity, that only things that really exist. But then we only limit ourselves to even a smaller bubble of the material world. Only material world exists. And so we are limiting, and science is only applicable within this domain, within this bubble. And everything that is outside the bubble should be outside of the scope of science, unfortunately. And science isn't telling us, okay, spirituality is beyond that. No, spirituality doesn't exist. It's hallucinations of the brain or some kind of physiological phenomena. But another thing about science, another of its core assumptions, there are a few of them, but these are the most I disagree with. The other one is rationalism. And rationalism is that everything should be logical and everything should be comprehensible by our minds, but our human minds. And I think of the best example of that would be, we have plenty of evolutionary adaptations when it comes to our bodies, when it comes to our minds. Some kinds of things are attractive to us, some are not. Some we are disgusted by some things. These are evolutionary adaptations. And I thought to myself, maybe logical thinking, maybe rational thinking maybe also an adaptation of survival of the genes of evolution. Because why we as advanced monkeys, let's say, should know and should comprehend the entirety of things. Maybe we are limited because only for our survival, like maybe some animals also think, of course, maybe rationally, but those animals aren't thinking about such questions about life as we as humans, of course. But maybe we are on a level above animals, but at the same time not at the level that can comprehend everything there is. And maybe our rational thinking is only a survival evolutionary adaptation and maybe not be able to describe everything as it is in truth. The same, for instance, we only see an electromagnetic spectrum, we
Yes.
only hear a spectrum of sounds. So maybe the
Yes.
same, our rational thinking is only a spectrum, a bubble within the entirety of other kinds of thinking and stuff like that. So these are the two main core assumptions of science that I do not disagree with, and I think they show us the limitations of science and the need for science to not have the monopoly of knowledge, that maybe there is some kind of extra logical, extra rational, extra material kind of knowledge.
I agree to your point, and I think it echoes again the history of scientific progression as our measurement systems and technology have progressed. So, with the same scientific method algorithm, at first you can apply it, but only with your five senses. You can only see things that are so small or so large or so far away, which means that in spite of the great scientific method, you can't reach every conclusion until you invent microscopes, telescopes, things like
Yes.
that. Now, after we've invented microscopes, things that may have still been relegated to the supernatural because they couldn't be repeatedly proven with our senses, with the scientific method, now they're tackled by science. Now they're encompassed within the bubble of what's rationally understandable. So it stands to reason
Great
that
example.
there are things that we simply can't comprehend. So, like remote viewing, we try to apply the scientific method to it. We sometimes get repeatable results, but sometimes we don't. Maybe there's some measurement systems that we haven't fully developed that are limiting our capabilities.
That's a good point, Mike. Make me want to ask the question about, technology, internet, for example, phones in our pocket, Neuralink. Is this the next step in those measurement tools? What would you say about that, Olek, as far as the future of science and, what do we need as a species to start going deeper besides just speculating, which I hate using that word because it tends to be
Negative.
look negative, but I don't see it
You're
that way.
stupid. You're speculating.
Correct. But
Hypothesis begins as a speculation, so hypothesis is good.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What do you guys think about that? Is Neuralink a possible way to, enhance the human mind in a way that we can create or even, look at these things in a different way with different measurement tools?
I think all of the technologies you mentioned, AI, Neuralink, and stuff like that, are only again within the material realm. I'd
Sure.
say because, for instance, a good example of what we were talking about is the switch from Newtonian classical physics into the quantum physics or into the Einstein's relativity stuff. Because, of course, the Newtonian classical mechanics were very good at physical engineering stuff, but then we discovered that it is again still only a domain and there are things beyond that. And the same is with the materialism, that we are all these technologies you mentioned are again within the material realm. The same with AI is only logical thinking, like A plus B equals C, etc. There are those logical things in even philosophy. However, it is only thinking within the material realm. One shift was again with the quantum stuff. The same, for instance, we have casual classical computing, then we went into quantum computing, and it was a huge leap forward. So maybe, as I mentioned about spiritual technologies, occult technologies, maybe the next step would be going into this dimension beyond the matter, beyond what we know. Like the Nazis were having some kind of UFO visions for channelings of anti-gravity and stuff like that, and I think this would be. And nowadays, with the technologies you mentioned, we are only maxing out the logical, the material stuff. So
Right. It's like building a better telescope or a better
Yes.
microscope, right?
Or having
we're
a
maxing that out.
computer with more RAM. So Neuralink, we have more RAM or more memory or faster processor, but it will be still within the same domain. So it won't be superhuman. Maybe we'll have calculator in our minds, but it won't go beyond casual stuff. Even, you know, I recently saw the thing that we have imagination, yes, so we can also, let's say, render things on our computers when it comes to video editing, 3D editing. We also doing similar stuff to our imagination, creating the things. However, it was mentioned that maybe we are bad at memorizing to some extent compared to computers, AI, maybe at RAM or at calculations. However, still our technology, even with the graphics cards, AI, is incomparable to human imagination. They compared this imagination of humanity with having like 1,000 highly advanced graphic cards all at once. So imagine how still advanced even within this domain we are. So just a side note for people
Yeah,
interested.
that's interesting. So we need to explore spiritual advancement, is what you're saying. What do you think we like to talk about, psychedelic, sacred medicine, that kind of thing on the show. We have had a handful of guests in that. What do you think about that as a tool, like things like psilocybin, DMT, that kind of thing, as far as exploring the spiritual realm? And it's impossible to measure in that way, but I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think that's a key or gateway?
I think it's some kind of method, but is it 100% accurate? I don't think so. I think that
No.
with all the psychedelics, we can have blended true visions with some kind of distortions. The same,
Like a
the
dream.
like a dream, but I would say it is the same with channelings, for instance. I do not say all channelings are wrong. I do not say all channelings are right. I think that with these channelings, and there are even methods when you analyze how things are channeled with those channeled messages, books, etc. Even within the channeling now genre, there are described things of how to minimize the impact of human brain imagination to have the clearer message when it comes to channeling. But at the same time, another thing would be maybe we are channeling from the wrong source. What if we are channeling from Satan? Just a funny idea, but what we are channeling from negative entities, or maybe not negative but entities who are laughing at us. Let's tell these noobs, these people, some
Dishonest.
things, and they will, be fooled, and they won't progress that much. And I think the same can be with psychedelics, that we can tap into wrong things. There can be combined hallucinations with the true visions, then can be combined even without hallucinations, then there can be combined true message with false message. And I think that it is very hard. However, I think that you mentioned a great point, that psychedelics may be the key to understanding scientifically spirituality, because we see that whatever person takes DMT, ayahuasca, and stuff like that, there are always similarities between the accounts of people who experience it, which may point to us that there is something to that beyond mere hallucinations, or maybe every person on earth has the same code in their DNA about hallucinations. This is, of course, the argument of the skeptics. However, I think that it can show us that there is something beyond. The same, for instance, with hypnotic regression. There are plenty of cases. I think some are bad, some are good, and I think that there are still some distortions within the hypnotic regression. But what is important in this hypnotic regression is the fact that whether they were regressing people to past lives or before current life, of different religions, or of atheists, or of people who believed in this, people who believed in that, all of them had the same points which were consistent within atheists and religious people, within Hinduists and Christians, etc. And I think that these are actually hypnotic regression, DMT, spiritual experiences, within these frames are the key to scientifically, at least within some sense of analysis when it comes to scientific method, maybe not going beyond the material, of course, but may point to us that there is something more, of course. And I think that these are key aspects. I even think that these are key aspects when it comes to ancient aliens, because I do not 100% believe that physical ancient aliens visited our Earth and helped ancient people. I think that the ancient aliens thing that is promoted in media may be in a large part about non-physical entities, about some kind like ghosts, spirits, like spirit guides, or these gods. Because even if we see what ayahuasca and DMT traditions are telling us, they are telling us that because how they came up with this ayahuasca, which is a very advanced mixture of different herbs, of different things, some of which need to be boiled, but others cannot. They are telling us that their ancestors were contacted with some kind of non-physical spirits of ayahuasca, and these spirits told them, combine this with this, and then you will have spiritual experiences. And I think it shows us that maybe some kind of myths about teachers of mankind, about gods helping humanity, can be not about aliens in the physical sense, but with these spiritual, non-physical entities. And I myself experienced a little bit of out of matter things, spiritual or semi-mystical things. And actually, to just tell to this first story, because we focused a lot about education, I'd say that about the same time I was researching and starting my book, I had parallel to that spiritual awakening or something like that, because for most of my years of early life I was agnostic, so maybe there is God, maybe not, but with little of atheistic things, that maybe this God things is stupid, maybe the spirituality is stupid, maybe we are truly biological machines. But parallel to my research in the history, I had plenty of spiritual things, and I would say this was like my evolution of masculine, so hard, evidence-based research about history, masculine part, with the feminine part about inner self, about the dreams, about unconscious things, about the feminine stuff in my life. So that's a fun thing that at the same time I had like the masculine and feminine part, and it was progress on the both sides. I had plenty of, I would say, prophetic dreams. These weren't like crazy stuff that, oh, you will marry this person, oh, you will, here are the numbers for the lottery to win. No, these were insignificant stuff, but I later understood why these were insignificant stuff. Because even if I dreamt of lottery ticket and of all the numbers to put, I would, even then, if I won the lottery, I would then think maybe that was a coincidence, because there is a possibility that actually on this day these numbers were chosen by the lottery machine. However, if there are insignificant things that are beyond our comprehension, for instance, being in a specific place, meeting a specific person, and talking about the same thing, but not I'm talking about, but this person is asking me something, and then month later, 2 weeks later, you are in this place and this person shows up and tells you the same thing you had in your dream. This is crazy. And even I had prophetic dreams about people I didn't know at that time. For instance, I had a dream that this is father of some kind of colleague from my class, which I do not know anything about when it comes to his personal life, but this is his father, he looks like that. And then completely randomly, because it was signing some documents and we were with parents because it was high school and we weren't of the age of 18, so we were with parents, and then I see this man, this father of a colleague of mine, but he's without this friend of mine. And I would say, oh, that's crazy. And you know what, I again coincidentally was on the queue of signing some documents behind him. And then I see he's signing with the surname of my friend, and he's really his father. I didn't know anything about his father. I didn't know he was of this posture, of this hair, and he looked like that. And these were insignificant things. It was no importance. They were not important at all, but they were for, I think they were for the realization that it isn't random, that it isn't hallucination, and that there is something beyond matter and casual physics, etc.
Even in spite of the insignificance, the fact that the details match made it a good data point for anyone that's paying attention to that scientific method algorithm.
Wow. So I wanted to ask about meeting Paul Wallace and collaborating with him. How was that? What's he like? And what is do you have any takeaways from that?
It was funny because it was Paul Wallace reaching out to me when I had about 150 subscribers on my English channel. He probably saw that, I'm creating valuable content, and he started commenting, and we kept in touch. We started messaging. I always was collaborating a bit on videos. He appeared on my show. I then later was to appear on his show, and we are still in contact with each other, and we are sometimes collaborating on some videos. So it was he reaching out to me
That's great.
randomly on the internet on the YouTube channel.
That's great, though. Paul Wallace is tremendous. He opened my eyes to a lot of things. I'm a big fan of his work.
So that must have been what's the word? Validating to have Paul Wallace reach out to collaborate with you.
Yes, that my message is to some extent valuable. That people who know the stuff, because maybe I had and I still don't have plenty of subscribers on the English channel, but if a person who is really knowledgeable in these topics, like an expert, sees that there is a huge value in that, a huge potential, then it is validating that what I'm doing is right, and maybe it is just time that maybe algorithm didn't push my video yet, but maybe it will in sometimes, and maybe it isn't about my message being bad, but maybe just some random stuff, and I think it like that.
I think it's great and important how folks in our space are reaching out to each other and seeking each other out, because it's not like we're going to replace all these tired old narratives instantaneously overnight and I'll become famous, but all the small voices banding together will eventually drown out the big lies, and eventually we'll be able to bring our friends and family into what we're into,
For sure. And I actually really like your message a lot, Olek. And we're still a small channel that's growing, but we have connections like in the community, and I really look forward to sharing your message with them.
Thank you.
And I have a feeling that you're going to be received very well in our community. And so I wanted to ask just about Josh, you must do a lot of rigorous research, right? And then you're also running YouTube channels. You're working as a translator as well. Could you tell us about is there some kind of research rhythm you do? Like how do you balance? Yeah, protocol. How do you balance this?
I have to say that I really slowed down in the last 2 years for like random reasons when it comes to my personal life, but in the past I used to be, I won't say, because plenty of people say, oh, you need the discipline. No, you need to be in such a flow state that you are doing everything effortlessly. So I'm reading a book, I'm finishing it at random place, and then I'm going into other tasks, etc., etc. Balancing these things, not to be too much into one thing, because if you, for instance, read 8 hours straight, you won't get any good result from that. So
Sure.
I would say probably there was a discipline when it comes that I continued that. So I wasn't going into other routes. However, it was about going to flow. I remember when the COVID hit, I even was reading like almost a book a day, maybe, sometimes every 2 days if it was long, 3, maybe a week. But I was reading like 5 books at once, and each week I was finishing these books and getting more and more. But, these were the circumstances that enabled me to do so. And nowadays, as I mentioned, I'm not that much active even when it comes to YouTube and stuff like that. I'm researching on the side, but I need to focus on other things. I've grown up, so it's not only about research and recording videos, you also need to do other things. So I had to say that I really, really slowed down during the last 2 years, and I would say that I'm now coming more into the rhythm of coming back to the stuff, and I would say that on a normal day when I slowed down, I do about 10 to 15% of the work I used to. So it was crazy, but as I mentioned, it wasn't for me anything crazy. It was crazy when it comes to results. But I was just, reading passionately this book. Okay, I read chapter 2, then going, okay, so now I record a video, and stuff like that. But I say, because plenty of people are talking about discipline, and I think it's something about spirituality even of ourselves, that if we do something and we feel resistance, we shouldn't do that, that we should only, but it's a difference between laziness, being tired, etc., because there are plenty of things. When you're tired, of course, it's better to not do something. The same if you are feeling not maybe that you shouldn't do that, but you're lazy, maybe you should also continue and do that. Either way, however, we should actually think and feel ourselves, and if we feel resistance, we shouldn't do that, even if it means not doing something more. As I mentioned, that I'm doing less now, I think that it was good for me. It was a season, this cyclical time. I see nowadays, even though I'm only 22 years old, but I see that over last, like, say 6 years, there were seasons to life, and I feel the vibe that it's not only about, like, we sometimes feel the vibe that, oh, it's summer, oh, it's winter, oh, it's autumn. There are vibes not only about the things that are around us, changing weather, but we feel the vibe that nowadays, oh, it's this cool summer morning, or this cool summer evening, or this cool autumn walk, etc. I think that the same is it is, of course, independent of what is around us, but when it comes to our inner selves, there are seasons to our life, and we should try to go into flow and navigate through that, and not going against it, because sometimes it is what ancient called, in Hindu thought, it was called the dharma. So that which is right, and that which is good right now, etc., that which is right. And in the Western thought, in ancient Greece, in Platonism, in Hermeticism, later Gnosticism, it was called necessity. That we logically, again, against being totally rational, we sometimes shouldn't be only logical and thinking logically, because there is the necessity. Maybe right now I shouldn't do that, I should do something else, which may be not logical right now, but it is necessary, because without that I won't go further and further. And it is seen within the modern politics and global stuff, because we see that we could avoid some conflicts and some bad things if we take what is right, if we went above our ideologies, because this person is from the left, this person is from the right, and he can't take that decision. Sometimes we need to go above logical reasoning and go, what is right now? Maybe right now it is right to abandon this project and do that. Maybe right now it is right to do that. So this is actually the message behind this cyclicality, what is right, what is not. I also describe this dharma necessity in my book, but it's just about history, about ourselves, and also on the macrocosmic level about the entire earth, that we need not only think rationally, disciplined, but we need to also be in flow, be receptive, and feel what is right now, and trust not only our feelings, but also trust the universe or something beyond ourselves.
So your research protocol is cyclical, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Which is the theme of your book and basically this episode, huh, Mike?
Yep, you got a really good level-headed approach on finding a balance, and even when you're doing a good thing, not turning it into a struggle. So speaking of the new pace that you've got, all the accomplishments you've got under your belt, what is on the horizon for Mr. Olek?
In the past, as I mentioned, I slowed down about 2 years ago. For the last 2 years, I've been a little bit slower. However, before that, when I was really, really fast and doing lots of things, I actually had like 20 or 30 topics for books and stuff like that. But I think that right now, there is a different season. After this slowdown, I need to rebuild from the basics. I think I need to do content again, because I love doing that. And actually in Poland, it was received really good. So probably it will be also received really good abroad. And then after I do the basics and do maybe share, and when I share some more messages with people like on this podcast, that then I may go ahead for further research and more books. But I think that right now it's a season for more soul defined when it comes to my presence and my message, because I'm ready.
That's excellent, man.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm really excited about how young you are, because I can really see as these seasons, unfold on your life, you're gonna really make some contributions to the
I hope
space,
so.
and you already have, in my opinion. So we're just really
I will
grateful.
send you those PDFs I mentioned to your email.
Please, and I honestly would like to bring you on the show again with a slideshow about the solar system with the calculations and stuff like that.
Or
I need to
about
see that
history,
again.
because today we
Pick a
spoke
topic.
about the biggest topics, and
Yes.
which is a nice start, because you need to go broad and then
Sure.
specialize in particular things. So I think we are on the tip of the iceberg when it
Yes.
comes to the actual lost history that I describe in my book.
Yeah, and well, if you're willing, we'll bring you on the show
We'll
a
do a
couple
deep
more
dive.
times. Yeah, for sure. But for now, we're really grateful that you made the time to. What time is it in Poland right now? Because really grateful that you made the time to come on the show.
Almost 6 p.m.
Okay, it's not as late as I thought. Is there anything else you wanted to add or mention to the audience before we wrapped it up?
I think no, thank you very much, and I only want people to read my book. It is Déjà Vu, has everything already been. It is only available on Amazons, but almost all over the world, in US, Canada, and Mexico, Australia, Great Britain, etc., but only on Amazons when it comes to the English version. And if you want to discover more from me, just copy paste my name and surname into YouTube, Facebook, or Amazon to find my book, and you will find plenty of my social media and my content.
Awesome. It was great to meet you today, Olek. Keep up the good work. We'll have links to all your material below.
Yeah, thank you, man.